Alright, I think we're live again, so let's see, where were we last time? I think last time I wrote all of the Lambda authorizer code. Well, I imported it and then I went over and explained everything that was happening. So I think I want to check real quick. Everything's pushed. It doesn't look like it. Oh yeah, I did have some amendments with all the config stuff, so which is fine. To make sure that the config is updating. Yeah, it is. Okay. Cool. So the config should be in a good place. And then up here, I guess I might not need this example because there is an actual config.json, so. Yeah. Might not need the example file, but that's something tiny that I could think about later. So went through the authorizer, and I think what I ended up on, what I wanted to end up doing in this stream was to get the DynamoDB stuff, like the boilerplate stuff set up, and then get some boilerplate hexagonal architecture stuff set up that I have done in the past for Lambda functions and that I thought worked really well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll start off with the hexagonal architecture stuff. So the way that I set it up in the calendar API this way, and I want to do it again because I liked it. I thought it made a lot of sense. In the shared folder, which will end up being my my Lambda layer. Crow API makes that into a Lambda layer. So what I'm going to do in there is create pretty much just a boilerplate incoming adapter for Lambda. And that incoming adapter well, I'll just show you. How about that? So here's my file called Lambda adapter util. Then I have all this stuff. So status code, stuff like that, constants instead of just putting in magic numbers or magic strings, and some errors. So I created some like errors on my own, nothing crazy, just like very, very basic errors, added them in, also a logger, and then I pretty much made a wrapper function, or I guess in Python this would be the equivalent of like a decorator for my handlers. So you pass in a function and then it pulls out all of these events. It pulls out the events and other arguments. So if a Lambda needs like the context and the callback, I don't use callbacks with Lambdas. I just use event and context. But the context I don't normally pull out of the passed in object. Then I do something called construct auth, which was up here, and this pretty much put together, well, it did some extra stuff for Rapid API if the request was a Rapid API request. Otherwise, it just pulled out the API key and unique ID from the authorizer request. So this was only relevant if it was a Rapid API request, and in my Lambda authorizer for the calendar API, I had a check in the Lambda authorizer, and it would set this variable if it would set it to true if it was a rapid API request. Because with a Rapid API request, the authentication comes through in this header, so I wanted to pretty much bypass the first level of my authentication. I checked a secret that Rapid API sends in requests in a header called like X Rapid API proxy secret or something like that. That was the first level of authentication to make sure that it was in fact Rapid API and it was my API that was being used to hit this endpoint. And then I know that it's authenticated, and then to get the user's unique ID, I just grab it from the Rapid API user header. So that's what the auth util was. I'll probably use some version of this because I like having a standard way to pull that information out. I'll probably still use something like that. And then it logs the authentication information, which probably shouldn't have that kind of a log in there. So maybe I should take that out. And then it calls the function. So that's all fine, and I'll go through how with error handling is actually used in just a second. That's all good, but what if there's an error? So it's highly possible that an error gets thrown. That's what all this is for. So it catches it. It sets a default status coded message. So this is just a 500, and then it sends out a message of internal server error. And then it checks for instances of specific errors, which could be thrown in any of my handlers. If it's one of these, then it has a specific error code that it needs to spit out, and then it sends back the error payload with a message. So that's how that file works, which I think is really good. I'm going to use that again. I also, so while I'm doing all this, I'll go ahead and make the comment. I used to think that when people said make code reusable, right? I always thought it was make code reusable for the code base you're working in, and if there's no necessary reason to make it reusable in the current code base you're working in, then you don't necessarily have to over-engineer from the start. But then I started realizing that making code reusable doesn't necessarily apply to just the code base you're working in. You might want to use that kind of function with anything. And that's where this comes in. You've already seen me do it if you've watched all of the streams. When I was making the infrastructure, I used this connect DynamoDB to Lambdas. This was a function that I've made once and I've reused multiple times in multiple different code bases. Now, at this point, I can just copy and paste it. I could probably put it in another file and then import it in my stack and use it that way. But it's a function that I wrote once and I've reused in multiple different places for the same purpose. Same with this. That's the idea that I'm going with, and that's why I'm perfectly fine copy and pasting this code and then explaining it after the fact on stream, because I haven't ever explained it before. But this is code that I wrote once. I know it works. I know it fits the pattern that I want to write in, and now I can just copy and paste it pretty much. The one thing I will say that isn't necessarily reusable are all of these, right? All the status codes and stuff. Just because, this error, well, maybe not the status codes, but the error, right? This error is very specific to the calendar API. So maybe that's something that I could work on, but yeah. I'll make this a debug log too, and then maybe I can pass the, let me do that over here too. Debug log, and then I'll pass it into the logger. So the logger, since we just touched on that, I'll go ahead and do this one now. It's Winston, and it pulls in a logger level from this config. I'm going to have to figure out how to mesh this config with the site analytics config, and then it gives that logger level to Winston. Winston, it doesn't have that much. It just has a little bit of formatting in it. So error stack true. That means if for whatever reason an error is thrown, it logs the entire stack. It doesn't just log the error message. That's something you have to build in. Metadata takes anything. Let me see so in here, for instance, this auth, this would technically be metadata for Winston. So it just logs it in its own metadata object instead of logging it at the top level. Oh, I lost it. And then JSON just means that it formats it in JSON. I'm a big fan. I actually have a draft of a blog post that I haven't ever finished about logging best practices, which is a very difficult thing because just about every application I've ever written has logged in some capacity, whether it's to debug, whether it's to give information, whether it's errors, whatever, there's some sort of logging. So it's kind of difficult to give best practices for logging because logging is used for literally everything. So I've started a draft of a blog post of kind of best practices for logging that I'm exploring and kind of tweaking as I go through building applications and logging in those applications. So that's a work in progress, but one of the things that I'm just about dead set on is to use some type of structured logging like JSON. Makes it very easy whenever you're, throwing logs into something like Splunk or CloudWatch, and you want to query with insights or even Datadog, anything. Having a structured format is almost a must. So that being said, I'm going to take this file and I'm going to also put it in shared, and then I'm going to go into shared, and I do have a package. I need to install some packages, right? Because this one uses Winston. This one doesn't use anything yet, but it very well might. Either way, I needed Winston for sure. Now I'm going to try to tackle these errors. Some of these might still apply, but so the errors are very simple, right? I pretty much just want to be able to take this error and identify it as its own error in my handling, in my error handling. So like this one, I'm not going to use. Input I might still use. Missing event, I don't think I'm going to use. Missing unique ID I might use because that was for users. But either way, I'll go ahead and move this guy over as well. So there are errors. I'll go ahead and mess with them right now, right? Like this guy, I'm not going to use him. This guy I might use. This guy I'm not going to use. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I'll adjust as I go. But to start off, I'm definitely not going to need those. And then I'll also go in here and take out the errors that I know I'm not going to use. I will keep the status codes. I think those are useful because they're just status codes. Which brings me to my next one, which is this config. And this, I think I'm probably going to have to do some coding with. Because the config in here is pretty much just a list of constants, right? And I can't just copy this over because I have the config file. So I think what I'm going to have to do is combine these. So I've parsed it with config, and then I'm going to have these constants. So I need a way to, I think what will happen is I'll just combine them. So I'll do something like that in here. Because at the end of the day, the config is also just constants. So I'll do the config first, and then I'll do constants. And that will combine everything, right? These guys I'll keep. Oh, he defaults to debug. I didn't realize that. But that's fine. This I don't need. These I don't need. I don't need these. I need the primary table name, and then I need the default region. So the other config that I just deleted was remnant of the calendar API that I just, whose config I just copied over. So So I think that will work. I guess the convention here, I'll go ahead and make a comment. Oops. Convention is constants are uppercase and is lowercase. Yeah. So that's kind of my that's my convention there. All the constants are uppers, which I think kind of tracks with other stuff as well. Okay, I think that'll start me off with. I have to work on another computer at the same time, so. I think that'll start me off with this. That's the config, and then I need the auth utils. Let's see. I'll go ahead and copy that. I did already talk about this and didn't copy it for whatever reason. So I don't need this information. I probably need that, and I do still have that error. Construct auth. It will probably just do this. I don't need that information. Don't need that. So it pretty much just pulls out the context from the authorizer. Yeah. And what is the authorizer actually? Because what's a little different in this? I return the policy and we have context. It's called user unique ID. Right, so that's the name of it. So I do need to change some things around in here, especially in the auth stuff. Okay. Then I think this will just change. It shouldn't change much. Just how I pull stuff out of this second parameter. So what you'll notice with this, I guess like, oh boy, decorator pattern function, it is asynchronous. And then this function, which is passed in with error handling, pulls out the event. Then if I go to a specific endpoint, you'll see I bring that with error handling in, and then this is pretty much boilerplate, and then comes the actual adapter. So with error handling, it's just boilerplate. It's just a decorator, something that I wanted for everything to have. And then I wrap the function, which is, how far does it go? Till here. And then I pass in the event. So this is all boilerplate. This is pretty much what all of my endpoints are going to look like, at least to start off. And then I kept the convention of adapter port logic naming. So you'll see this is the adapter, but it's called index. Could be changed, I guess. Maybe should be. And then I import a port, and that port I pass in the auth and the body, and the body is pulled out from the event. Here's the port, and the port is pretty much the interface for the business logic. So I have auth and payload. The logic itself only needs the auth, in this case, to create the calendar, and then the logic, pull out the auth, I pull out the unique ID. If there's no unique ID, then I throw an error, otherwise I create a calendar. And creating a calendar is also a port. So now we have an outgoing port. And I stored all of those in a single file. So for instance, create calendar, we would do calendar.create, and then users.addCalendar. So the port is the interface for creating a calendar. And this is kind of, in one of the previous streams I had talked about, I want to make this, I wanted to do this with hexagonal architecture because there are a lot of DynamoDB or NoSQL specific things that I'm going to be doing in the code, and I want to make it not DynamoDB specific. So if you wanted to change this from DynamoDB to SQL, you could do that. You would just pretty much call calendar.create whatever and leave off the users.add calendar. You would just change the port, and then all you would do is change the database calls to, instead of being DynamoDB, be a driver to SQL, a SQL database like Postgres. And then if you had SQL, you would just have like a calendar table and put in all the relevant information like its ID and who owns it. And then whenever you're doing something like there's probably like a, well, there's got to be like a users.get calendar, or I did that in Velocity. I used a service proxy integration, but there would be, let's see, an equivalent function if I had written a Lambda function for it and code for it that's like get user calendars. And to do that, instead of going to this function, you would go to a table, like you would go to the calendar table and you would say get calendars, or like select calendar IDs where user equals this username, right? And that's a database specific implementation. So it should stay out of create calendar and it should stay out of get user. Instead, that should be handled by the port in the database call specifically. That's kind of my opinion on it, at least. I don't know if this is actually 100% the best implementation, but this is what I've done and I've had good success with it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah. Let's see. And then I'll go ahead and I'll grab all of this and paste it in here. So now it has an index, and then I'm gonna strip all of the specific things out. So I'm gonna make this as boilerplate as possible. And the reason I'm doing this, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. The reason I'm doing this because I'll then copy this structure to all the other endpoints and then change them accordingly. So that's fine. And then we have logic. I don't need errors and probably need some sort of port. That'll be that. I guess I could leave the unique ID. Make it back. Okay. So there's my boilerplate hexagonal architecture stuff. Just gonna paste it in there. I think that was, yeah, that was going to be completely asynchronous. There's the get, and there's the delete. Okay. So that's adding in the boilerplate stuff. They're not going to work. I didn't expect them to work. I'm going to go ahead and delete some of these tabs. I have a lot of tabs open. Don't need that. Okay, get this solid one open. And yeah, that was the boilerplate stuff that I was talking about in the last video that I was going to have to go through and do. So that's good. That's pretty much done. I've thought about if anyone's interested in having all of this kind of boilerplate stuff that I'm doing set up for them in like a hello world type of Grow API implementation, let me know and I can set that up, because I think I would also get value out of that. Yeah, I think I'd also get value out of that. But since I have all this reference code in front of me, I can just copy and paste. And I realize that others can't, but I'd be more than happy to share that if people would like. So yeah, the reason stats doesn't have anything is because that's going to be a completely asynchronous. Oh, yeah, there you go. It's going to be completely asynchronous. Oh, I need to. A completely asynchronous endpoint. So it's going to be push to SNS, and then I think, did I do that in the last one? I did do it, didn't I? Yeah, there's the async lambdas, and then I grab stats, and then I publish to it. Yeah, add method, and then the post with all the stuff. And then I want to try in here, I want to try to do JSON and not, yeah, so I'm going to, just so I, okay. Yeah, I want to try to use JSON instead of using a form. I think that would make me happier if I could get it to work. So there's that. That was the hexagonal architecture boilerplate. Now I'll go over the DynamoDB stuff. And that's also in Calendar API. So let's see, I'm trying to think. Did I actually use this? No, I didn't. Okay. I'm not going to put it in the other one. I'll just go ahead and copy all this, move it over, and then we can talk about it. So I have a database folder, trying to be mostly generic here. And in here, the entry point is this database session. And this is what my, referencing the Calendar API again, this is what my ports, op database API keys, this is what it calls. Also, I don't know if I ever explained, but this /opt /database, that's where the Lambda layer lives. So if you ever create a Lambda layer with JavaScript files in it like this, that's where it will be located. That took me a weirdly long amount of time to figure out. There's not a crazy amount of documentation about that for whatever reason, but that's where it is. So all of this code, this all gets, I guess, zipped up, and then a Lambda layer is created, and then whenever I attach that Lambda layer to a Lambda function, it's mounted at this /opt path, and it starts exactly right here, right? So /opt/config /opt/config. So instead of shared, it's just that. Yeah. So that's where the ports are reading the information from. The session itself, I don't think I'm going to have to mess with. I am going to have to add these to this one to shared. So I need to npm install those two that I know of. And I'm using the SDK v3. I don't think it's that much different, but. And now those will work whenever they're pushed to the Lambda. Oh, this is still config /opt/config. That will pull out the region, that will create a DynamoDB client, and then I can create a document client from this DynamoDB client. That's what I export. Construct updates was a utility that I used. I might actually be able to use this again. And then I had all of these other files. So I'm going to, let's see. I'll need users, and then instead of one of those, I will need something that's called sites. And that will do all of my sites for me. That will handle all of the websites. So in the README, I'm going to pull this back up. don't need the session anymore. In the sites, I'm going to need to create a site. I'm going to need to, well, this is users. The get part is from users. Post sites, I'll need to create a site. Get sites by ID, I'll need to be able to read my sites. Post stats, do I want that in sites or in its own file? I might do that in its, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'll leave it in the sites file and then delete. So when I do delete, I call it remove because delete is a protected word. It's like a keyword in JavaScript, and yeah, I don't call it delete. I call it remove. Yeah. Okay. So I don't need any of these. However, I think I could probably. I might be getting ahead of myself. That's pretty much it for the database boilerplate. So I think we're good on the database boilerplate stuff. Yeah. Database should work out of the box now, and then I'll need to just create the logic for all of the outgoing adapters. So these, at this point, these are outgoing adapters. Yeah. So that's all the boilerplate stuff that I had, and that didn't take near as long to go through and explain as I thought it would. So I might start with some of the database stuff and then go up the stack. I don't know how far I'll get today, but I think I'll probably be able to try. So this post sites, let's see. I'm going to do something similar to the calendar when you create a calendar. So I'll have a port in here. This will be oops. I don't need a module that exports. This is going to be something called create site. And then an async function called create site. And this is going to have the well, just the user ID, right? User ID. I call it unique user ID. Should I just call it user ID? What did I call it in here? I call it user unique ID. User unique ID. Should I just call it unique ID or user ID? It's kind of weird to call it unique ID. Maybe JWT user ID key. I think that sounds better, at least to me. Let's go here. Do that. I don't need this example anymore. I have decided that it's not necessary since I'm keeping this config in source control. User ID, and this is just going to be called user ID. Yeah. So I will need a get user because that function doesn't exist right now. Yeah. So I'll need a port for that. Equals /r/. So I know I'll need one of those. And that was by user ID. Makes sense. I just start pulling out of the database. So let's see. I know I'll need stuff from the users, and then I know I'll need stuff from sites. from sites, I'm going to need create site, and then here I'm going to need get user. I'll also need, I'll call this read user, sorry. Create, read, update, remove. Crr. Instead of crud, I use crr. There's get user, and then I'm going to need to change that here too. Read user. Just to keep my naming consistent. Create, read, update, remove. Unfortunately, I use remove. I don't use delete, but that's all right. Actually, I could use delete now. I just have to, yeah. Well, I could use it here and then not in DynamoDB because I can't do like users.delete. What I like to do is something like, oh, I can just call this users. I think that's how I did it before too. Sites, right? So I like to do, when I create a site, sites.create, and then this will be a const. I'll get the site ID out of this, and then that'll be asynchronous, and then I'll do await users dot update sites, add site ID, and then I'll return the site ID. And then in here I'll have something like const user data await users dot read user ID, and then I'll return user data. So that's my create, that's my read, user ID. I will need to do, yeah, I'll need that, right? Yeah, I'll need that because I'll need to store who owns the site. Yeah. Yep. Create site ID, add site to users owner set. Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense to start off. So now I need user, read user. Let's see what I have already. This is not users. This is about calendars. Oh, well, this is site. Okay. So this will turn into site, add site, remove site. When I do this on users, add site, I'm going to do the site ID and then the list. So we will have, this would be owner, right? Is that what I called it? User ID, profile, owner. So that will be the list that it adds it to. Yeah. Yep. So in users, I'm going to need string ID, which is the, oh yeah, I also need the user ID, don't I? User ID, site ID. I don't know what I was doing here. ID of the new site. And then I need string, which is list. Well, this is really an enum. Is that a? I don't know. I'm just gonna do it. I don't know if that makes sense, but what's it called? It's like js.enum. At enum, and then type enum for. There we go. That's what we want. I'll go ahead and do that at enum. This is going to be called lists. I don't know, site lists. Site list types. This types we got owner, writer. What did we have? Owner, admin, writer. And this is a const. Those types will be exported. And then in here we're going to do dot list types dot and in here should be that. Yeah. Site list to add to. And this is going to be add site now. And then I have my update params, and then I want to update it. Aha. And my update just calls update. Okay. That makes sense, I think. So if I want to add a site, add to add list, site list. Just this. There we go. Calendar ID. This will be site ID. And it has to be a set. And if you make it a set, then the document client knows that it needs to encode this as a set. And then I update it with the update params. Cool. That's, I think that works. Delete sites maybe, yeah. Remove sites probably actually the right terminology for this because I'm not deleting a site. User.delete site sounds a little different than user.remove site. Yeah. Yeah, I stand by that. Same JS doc. Same function. Fingerprint. And I think this is all the same except delete. Is it the most necessary thing? Maybe not, but so there's the users, and then I need to do users read. Update, so read would go before that. Oops. I just need that. ID is ID. And what does it return? What does this even return? Nothing. It doesn't return anything. This should return user data following this. Owner, admin, okay. Yeah. User data, which looks like that. I don't know if this is exactly how you're supposed to do this, but how I'm going to do it. There. That's what it's going to look like. So this is just a DynamoDB read, and that looks like this. So I'm going to copy this data to get me started. Don't need this. Document client.get. This is going to be user. The key is ID. Oh, well, there we go. The key is just ID. Secondary ID, so now I start needing constants. So secondary ID would be, we'll call it user secondary ID. It's going to come from config as a constant. Oh, I already have one. There we go. I don't even need this. It's called user sort key, and in config, I'm sure it looks the same. It looks like I want. No, it's not in there. I must have deleted it. This will be user, and then we're gonna have, what else do we have? Oh, sorry, profile. Then we have a site ID and we have stats. Okay. So there are all those sort keys, and then jumping back over here, we have that. That works. Only I need that. That's fine. Where am I? Here we go. Read, get ID, secondary ID. ID's passed in. If not, user.item, then return an empty object. I think that's probably what I should actually do. Otherwise, take out the ID, take out the secondary ID. I might just take out the secondary ID, and then this is going to be called user data. So it has the ID with it, and this is from user.item, and then what I'm going to do is return user data, and it should never actually hit that. No. It should never hit that. That's reading. Maybe, I think. So there's read. I have add site. Now I need to do sites.create. I don't have anything in sites. So I'm going to have to start with some of this. Then I'm going to need, I just create a config for two things that are going to be in this file, which is that and this. Stats secondary ID. Site secondary ID. And then I think I'll keep it up just in case. What did I need for here? I needed create, sites.create. And I can guarantee that I have something in here that looks like that. Here we go. I guess I didn't do JS doc strings for all of them. What do I need to create it at? I need the user ID. Owner. Yeah, I'll do owner. Create it by an owner. Generate token. Ooh, yeah, I forgot about that one. That was yeah. new site ID. I'll add that in just a second. Lambda new site ID. What I do is the ID is called new site ID, and the secondary ID, and this is called site secondary ID. And then I take that new site ID and I return it. I don't do anything with the created part because I don't need it. Okay. Generate token. That was in here. And then I'll go up here and grab that. It's very simple. It just creates a GUID. That's all it does. Random UUID from the native crypto library, and then it creates a random ID. If I ever want to change that in the future, though, it's in a file. I just have to call once, right? I just have to change it in one place. So I did it that way. And then we have module exports, create. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and create a. This is a string. User ID returns string. Okay. Yeah, I need to set up the structure for this site. So we're going to have all this good stuff. All that good stuff. Owner. Owner. Oh, it's already there. And admins is a new set. Writers, readers. There's writers and readers. And I have emails. Emails, URL, and created. URLs. So I will need a URL passed in. And then created. Should I do ISO? What did I have created for? I think that should probably be an ISO timestamp. I did a lot of timestamps in calendars. I'm sure I have like something, right? Maybe it's in one of the, let's see. Oh, that's sites. The wrong one. There we go. Calendar ID, events. Start time, end time. I'm going to see, because I know I printed out the ISO format at one point. I can just do new date dot. Where is it? I know I did it somewhere. There's a specific, to ISO string, that's it. Yep. There's a specific one that I've used and that I was looking for, and that was it. So create is going to be date dot to ISO string. I don't think that worked. That syntax doesn't look right. There. Now I have my timestamp set. Is that the structure? Is that what we're looking for? Owner, admins, writers, readers, emails, URL, and created. So I need to pass a URL in as well. Create owner URL. Should there be, there should probably be some way to verify that you own the site. Well, I guess if you put the script on it, but if someone put this, it's just a put. How did the, let's see, DynamoDB API. There's, I think one of them like overwrites anything that exists, right? Creates a new item or replaces the old item with the new item. So that's not what I want. I forget what you're supposed to do though. There's a way to not overwrite it. Oops, that's not what I wanted, but I guess it'll work. Put update, yeah. Put creates it, but is there a way to say like don't overwrite? Exists. If exists is true, we'll check to see that value. On an attribute value? Oh, I see. Yeah, it's in expected. Let's see. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like condition expression. Where's that? Condition expression. I'm guessing that that one just means oh, attribute not exists. All right. Why are there so many like weird pages to go through? True if A is not equal to B. That's not equals to? Less than or greater than, I guess? Yeah. Sure. So I need a condition expression similar to that. Attribute not exists. ID. Right? That's what I was saying. Right? Put item up over its item. Same key if it exists. If you want to avoid this, use a condition expression. This allows the right to proceed only if the item in question does not already have the same key. Like ID. Okay. This will just create a new site though. What I want to check is the URL. I guess you, what's the harm in someone saying, I already have that site, right? What's the harm in saying, right, I own thomasstep.com. Let's say I use this, I create my site, and then I have my own site ID. I start sending stats, right, because I send by the ID, not the URL. Right, so I start sending stats to my ID. What's the harm in someone else saying that they also have their site's URL is thomasstep.com? that's not going to work, but yeah, so that's not going to work, but what was I going to use URL for? That just is like metadata kind of to show what it's called. Probably that's probably what I did it for. So I guess you could call your site whatever you want to. URL or name maybe. Yeah. I call it URL or I could call it name. What does Google Analytics do? I don't know. That's just metadata. That can change at any point in time, so I'm not too worried about that right now. I'll start off with just the ID. Yeah, let's say the URL is not required. You just need the site ID. And then, yeah, so this is pretty much just a counter at this point. You put the URL, you can put the name, right? Like I could do name, use site ID, default it to that, and then change it later on. I could do something like that. Or do that. Make the name the URL, and then you change the name later. At this point, this is all just, is this anywhere else? No, I didn't use this for anything else. Yeah, I guess that would make sense why you would want the URL. Sure, let's add a name in. I know I probably should have had this in the design, but then I'll default the name to the URL, but you can change the name if you want. I don't know why you would, but maybe you would. Maybe you want to change the name. I have to do that right. Okay. And when it was created. So now we have all that information. That's how you create a site. Back to the ports. Site's created, returns the site ID. User, you add the site ID. Add site. And then you can also read the user. Then I probably need some way to create a user. So I will go ahead and just copy this real quick. With an ID, don't need that, don't need that. ID is ID, secondary ID is already there, and then I want that so we don't overwrite anything. I think that's pretty important that you don't overwrite a user. And then, yeah, let's do all that stuff. Okay, and I will do it same as this. These will be new sets. Okay, we have owner, admin, writer, reader, created, so I will need now. And this will be insert string. We don't want him to exist already. And then there's nothing, so we just return. Yeah, it's just either return successfully or not. ID. There's our create. All right. That should definitely get us started. So I'll go ahead and start wrapping up for today. Let's see. Oh, 1 second. So let's see. We went through a lot of the boilerplate stuff for hexagonal architecture. We went through a lot of the boilerplate for DynamoDB. And we started writing some of the logic, or not really logic, but some of the code to interact with DynamoDB, right? Yeah, I think that was everything that I wanted to accomplish and a little bit more. We started on the DynamoDB stuff, and I didn't really expect to even get there. I'm going to start deleting some of these files I don't need. Delete. 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 Okay, I have my sites and my users. So I have create site, I have read user. I'm going to need something like, I'll need like a create user. Well, now that I'm here, I already did the hard part of user ID. Right, I did the hard part of writing that in. Writing the DynamoDB handler, I guess if that's what you would call that. Create user ID, and then user data. There would be no user data. Does it return anything? Could I return something? I don't think DynamoDB returns the item if you create it. I think you have to ask for it to. I think so. So in here, there won't be anything. Definitely not if I create it, because right, it would fit the use case of the person's checking. Yeah, I don't think I should have user data. Oh, that's why I had it. Create user, did that. Should we store user data in the policy? No. So it's just the user ID, and that goes in here, and this will probably stay the way it is. And we can adjust later if we need to. Okay, well, there's even a little bit more. So we'll have extra stuff in here, right, to fit whatever we're doing in the README. So we'll be able to create sites. Well, I guess we can already do that. We need to be able to read sites from a user. Yeah, that's fine. Get sites by ID, so we'll need to be able to read a site by its ID. We need to be able to post stats. We need to be able to delete. So this is actually, that's not future, but yeah. So we'll do that to start off with. And then on stats, I'm going to put, do I have TTL in there? I do have TTL in there. So I'll start off with just letting whenever I do my synthetics monitoring and stuff like that, I'll just let the stats just kind of expire on their own without archiving anything, but I think I will have to start doing archiving fairly early on, I guess. Yeah, so that'll be it for today. That was a decent amount that I didn't expect to actually get done. So I think in the next one we'll keep working on the DynamoDB stuff, trying to get that all fleshed out, and then I'll start working on the actual endpoints to write the logic and to finish out those endpoints. So, but for now, I'm happy with it. I've got no problem with it. So we'll go ahead and end the video here. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you're enjoying this. Let me know if, I guess, comments, or reach out to me over email or whatever. If you want to use any bit of this, let me know. And I guess I'll see everyone in the next one. Bye.